Good evening, everyone, and hope you've had a really exciting day so far, attending different sessions at SERI and also visiting our exhibition hall. So, I would like to welcome you all to the track session on security and privacy, merging research priorities across the paradigm of cybersecurity research. So, without further ado, I would like to introduce our esteemed panelists. We have with us Professor Virendra Sule, who's the professor in the Department of Electrical Engineering at the Indian Institute of Technology, Bombay. And we have with us Professor Veni Madhavan from the Indian Institute of Sciences, Bangalore, Mr. Mika Susi, who's the Executive Director at Finnish Information Security Cluster, Finland, and our esteemed moderator, Professor Jaideep Srivastava from Minnesota University. Now, I would request Professor Srivastava to take the reins of the session and take it forward.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Vikas, and thank you all the panelists. And of course, welcome to everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you might be. So without any ado, let's get started. And this is the order in which we will go. We will first hear from Professor Veni Madhavan. He will talk about impact of quantum computing on security and privacy. And then we will have Professor Virendra Sule, who will talk about the future of cryptanalysis. Then we'll have Mr. Susi, Mr. Mika Susi, and he will be talking about creating cybersecurity ecosystems to protect critical assets of a digitalized society. And finally, I will speak about cyber attacks and countermeasures in the age of AI and machine learning. And each of us will speak for roughly about 4.5 minutes. And then we will go into a Q&A session. And please type as you're hearing the talks, any questions that come to your mind, please enter those. And then after that, Vikas will provide those to us. And then I will moderate the Q&A at the end. Okay, so Professor Veni Madhavan, please go ahead.
Thank you, Professor Jaideep, and thank you, DSCI NASCOM, for organizing this and inviting me. Good to be with friends. I will address the issues of quantum computing in general, and more specifically to security and privacy, insofar as our digital information systems are concerned. So first, I have attempted to classify as three tracks the whole of this quantum stuff. I call them race and supremacy. That's the first one, quantum, race, and supremacy. Second track is what I call quantum readiness, preparedness, and correctness. Third is this stream, which I call quantum defiance and future. Now, why defiance? It's actually like opportunities and threats and so on. But from a cryptographer's perspective, old things are falling apart is one threat. But of course, new things will come is the opportunities part. But in the interim, until you means what? An individual gets to see the light of using quantum computers in the same way as we do this little machine in front of us, or the mobile phone, or a desktop, or a supercomputing cluster, and so on and so forth. We're going to be a long day off. But in the interim, what do we do? And in the future, in the advent of these things really happening and the threats really fructifying, then you need to be prepared. So these are the three factors. It's very exciting to talk about quantum computing. I've been studying the last 5 years, at least 3 years more intensely, particularly from a cryptographer's perspective, as I said, because one, the security and privacy in the digital arena, there are many issues. There are many technological, technical, theoretical, and systemic issues. You call them the peripheral stuff and the intermediate stuff, the operating systems, and finally the kernel. The kernels have to do with cryptographic protection. And I come from that world. Security and privacy are usually protected by means of encryption by symmetric or public key systems, and by means of integrity checks, by digestion hashes, and by means finally, of course not finally, of by um, you know the world of digital signatures and privacy guarantees assured by public key cryptography. Now, there is a whole gamut of things about quantum computing's intrusion into this world. Um, a la Peter Shor, a famous mathematician, computer scientist, um, a looming threat about cracking all the semi-hard problems which our public key cryptography is based on. Okay. Now, let's getting a little more technical. Like those problems were not NP hard, but were solved by sub-exponential type algorithms, basically the integer factoring and other discrete log-based algorithms on which the authentication and the signatures rely on. And these were supposedly solvable in polynomial time in quantum computers, certain models of computation. Likewise, in the symmetric arena, all the digests, all the symmetry stuff could perhaps be solved not so efficiently. The sense that, for example, AES encryption or a decryption or AES cryptanalysis or a message digest collision finding take about order n in an unsorted way. Quantum machine, there is square root n. So there is this difference. Now, with all this, to summarize again in a short while to bring the perspective more close to hand, how is the world reacting? One big world, deep pockets, is going to build machines which hopefully will beat our contemporary supercomputers as a class of, let's say, Summit or something, 400 petaflop machine, which is unlikely. We don't know when. Various dimensions, various perspectives, analog versus the digital, and so on, various types of physics, various types of electrical engineering come into play. With all this, there is a race. The race, of course, is both technological, commercial, as well as theoretical, meaning to be able to tell the quantum computers can really beat a conventional machine, classical Turing machine, von Neumann machine, in its own level playing turf, like solve the problems really polynomial time and or in square root time. That day also is far off, but it will come. Now, in the meanwhile, there is a lot of things about readiness and correctness, which is important. Now, one particular aspect of readiness and correctness, in particular, again, for guaranteeing future of security and privacy, again, with respect to the public key world, public key cryptography way of looking at things, the digital signatures, the authentications, the key exchange, is by means of post-quantum cryptographic algorithms, which perhaps are theoretically stronger than the ones we use, although theoretically not stronger in that sense, rather do not lend themselves to quantum cryptanalysis. Again, research world is agog with these things, but its picture is a little murky. It's not clear that the answer is categorically yes, but you need to be ready. So one is the world of post-quantum cryptography, and here it places a lot of future playground for, I would call it entrepreneurial talents, academic talents, to build systems with the new age. In fact, quantum cryptography is going to be called the new cryptography. We are all called classical. I call myself a neoclassical. So with this, the readiness entails preparations of the new algorithms, interfacing them with existing systems. For example, the PKI-based signature systems, how would they work in the future? How would the IPsec protocols work on the networks? And a gamut of things. So this is the future. And one of the usual ending note I do on several talks I've been giving on this, one of the talk is in front of me, is to say what is the future. Now, this is something like you all like to predict. I predict, like I would have predicted 40 years ago when I used the first analog machine, died. Then there was hybrid machines, died. Digital machines remain. Now, today we have digital machines and the quantum machines. Probably the future will be a blend of both, which is what the present day technologists in the commercial worlds also see. So it's good to be ready, of course, we'll be prepared for future. I did not touch upon the operating system and the programming world environment, which is even more, big question mark. It's a place for computer science people to invent new programming methodologies. Already there are tools and techniques available within major companies. So with these kinds of, I would call it optimistic future, particularly all of us will be optimistic for 21 onwards. I close my comments on quantum computing and its impact on security and privacy. Thank you.
Oh, sorry, I was muted, so you couldn't hear me. Well, thank you, Professor Veni Madhavan. Professor Sule, go ahead.
Okay. So happy to be part of this session with Professor Veni Madhavan and Professor Srivastava, as well as Mika Susi. And I have this my topic of talk is going to be cryptanalysis and its role in the near future, or kind of future of cryptanalysis. So first of all, really, this topic is misfit in discussion on cyber security, because cyber security's goals are essentially different. They are to study and mitigate security issues in the protocols or in the cyber world, and really not concerned with cryptography as such, because whenever cybersecurity systems function, they assume, quote unquote, that the cryptography is secure. So nobody is going to ask question about cryptographic primitives really in studying cybersecurity. So, but on the other hand, the role of cryptanalysis is to estimate security of these primitives. The classical symmetric key primitives, public key primitives, then some of the modern cryptographic primitives required for identity, secret sharing, zero knowledge proof, and now, of course, with blockchains and various things. And there are, of course, a variety of applications in signatures, contracts, and everywhere. So they all require various levels of security estimation. And but cryptanalysis is primarily the goal has been to study, estimate security of the primitives which were known as symmetric key and public key primitives, and also many of these the new schemes which are based on various mathematical principles. So cryptanalysis is a hardcore technical subject, and so that's the reason why it doesn't get its proper role in cyber security really. But one must remember that the past cryptanalysis really established the current standards of cryptography. For example, the key length, sizes of primes, nature of elliptic curves, then various cipher building blocks and structures. They were cryptanalyzed in great detail through various methods of cryptanalysis. In fact, this book by Bruce Schneier, there is an old paper by Bruce Schneier who tries to define what is really cryptanalysis. And then if you really see that paper, although it's very old, these goals of cryptanalysis themselves have evolved over a period of time. And they have led to the standardization of the current cryptography. Now, which is what we consider as secure, because without that cryptanalysis, we wouldn't have had secure cryptographic primitives, and we wouldn't have had the current cyber world and its efficiency and so on. But primarily, the issue of security in cyber world exists because you can't use cryptography everywhere. You see, because cryptography is not easy to use, and in the cyber world there are so many other protocol operations that are taking place where cryptography is not used, strong cryptography is not used, and that's the reason why there are security issues. If we could use cryptography there, then there wouldn't have been cyber security issues really. So, coming to this past gamut of methods of cryptanalysis, they are mostly consisted of brute force cryptography, in a sense that trying to find out based on the encryption data to match, say, a specific key and search over key size or whatever is the secret bits. You search brute force way to find a match, and so that was one of the earliest cryptanalytic method. And then there was statistical attack and linear differential cryptanalysis, then study of structural weaknesses of these ciphers, time memory trade-off, linear complexity based analysis for prediction. And then in recent times, say especially after 2004, these algebraic and SAT based cryptanalysis came. And at the same time, for public key, people had, especially the mathematically oriented computational community, had come up with very exciting methods for factorization, discrete log computation, and so on. And there was a vigorous activity which was taking place after 2004 in order to standardize these cryptanalysis of the public key. But most of these, once the cryptography got standardized, the sizes were fixed and so on. It is essentially end of the day, in a sense that the complexity theorists, they wrote off this cryptanalysis to be very hard for most of these cases, and the entire world believes that it is all secure. And well, there have been many attempts at breaking the symmetric key ciphers and various things, but really there has not been much success based on the classical methods. Okay. And so essentially currently as it is seen that cryptanalysis has no future, because you really can't now find any flaws with the modern cryptographic primitives, whether they are public key, symmetric key. So partly, of course, this picture had changed after the algorithms by Shor, and that quantum computing will be a threat. Then also it was known that the quantum computing will be able to search. This Grover's algorithm showed that it will be square root time. So it was known that some of the brute force searches as well as factorization problems will be within the reach of the quantum computers, and that's one looming threat, and that is going to have major impact now. But now, what about cryptanalysis? So, what I would like to say is that the problem of cryptanalysis, while it has had a lot of development in the recent times and has looks like saturated, the people concerned, the problems that cryptanalysis poses are actually very interesting problems, and it is now turning out that just like in the olden days, a lot of new technology, rather we can say the whole computer's invention came because of the cryptanalysis of the Enigma, and a lot of new technology or spin-offs in technologies came because of this cryptanalysis. Same thing has started happening now, and one can see that new methods based on see, one more thing is the technologically also the methods that were available, or rather currently which are kind of saturated cryptanalysis methods, they have not been very advanced in terms of scalability, or the say their ability to actually grapple with really realistic size large problems. They were not very easy for parallelization, and a lot of attempts were made, but well, it has not been very easy. But now the new research that is taking place and will happen in the future is coming up with very highly scalable parallelizable methods, and they are based on now say new developments, especially something like there was a dream. You see, like mathematician David Hilbert had said that purpose of mathematics is to linearize everything. So in cryptanalysis also this linear formalism has dominated and has yielded results in sometimes. But now again, I see that that is playing a role, and linear representation based methods have, are coming up, and they are so powerful that they are likely to provide a completely new standard for cryptanalysis, even for the classical cryptanalysis. So essentially what will happen is these so-called hard problems, those were considered or rather written off by the complexity theorists, they will have a linear representation, not even approximate, but exact linear representation. And then one will be able to estimate that depending on the size of that linear representation, what is the likely time memory is required to do this. Moreover, because the operations are, it's all ultimately going to be linear algebra, and so no more the role of satisfiability theoretic or nonlinear methods are going to play. It's going to be pure linear algebra. And then as far as the scalability, parallel computation and all this world is concerned, linear algebra is the holy grail basically. And then what will happen is the new hope for this new cryptanalysis is that once the problem formulation becomes linear algebraic, then quantum computing might come in handy even for cryptanalysis. And many of those problems which were not considered really as part of quantum computing, there is a side branch of quantum computing which people have started calling as quantum compilation. So in a sense that well, the user doesn't need to know any quantum computing. The user just develops his or her method of computation, and then it is compiled for a quantum computer, and then quantum computer will carry out its operations on the quantum physical side. So the person who is actually programming all needs to know only the method, which is linear algebra. And because of its inherently parallel nature and the scalability, etc., these methods are likely to be very, very powerful and will play a major role in standardization of the new cryptography. Like Professor Madhavan mentioned, this post-quantum cryptography. Now, obviously, the response to the current level of development of quantum computers is going to be post-quantum cryptography. But is it standardized? No, it is as yet not standardized. And then this new cryptography, which is based on symbolic computation, I call it symbolic cryptanalysis, and or linear representation based cryptanalysis, that is going to be required inherently, theoretically, for say cryptanalysis of some of the post-quantum primitives, especially post-quantum primitives based on multivariable polynomial systems. They will have to be they will be studied by this methodology. I mean, it's immediately possible. What I feel is that so far the cryptanalysis got saturated, and then the complexity theorists essentially dominated in this on the scene and said that no, these are all not doable problems, or these are hopeless problems. But you see, one must realize the cryptographers don't get discouraged by these kinds of remarks. Cryptographers want to solve practical problems in practical time, and the research has been driven mainly by this motto. And as I see it, in the nearest future, cryptanalysis is going to succeed based on this motto: is that to find practical solutions to practical problems, because the sizes are not asymptotically large or infinite or something. After all, any primitive or RSA or elliptic curve You can't have just because something to make it secure, you can't keep on indefinitely extending the key size. That
Right.
was
Okay.
possible so far, but now it's not no more possible. You can't double the key size now because then it will become so sluggish cipher that it will no more be useful. So there is a limit to how long can you go, and at the same time, cryptanalysis is catching up with new powerful methods which will be even more powerful because of the quantum computation possibility that comes into picture, and the future of cryptanalysis of these methods will be necessary for standardization of the post-quantum cryptography. So I think this is the scenario that I see for future of cryptanalysis. I would like to mention essentially just these 3 points so that I re-emphasize that. First point is cryptanalysis emerging with new scalable methodology, which will have disruptive applications due to its superior methodology, inherent parallelism, and application of the quantum computing. The new methods have the potential to be strengthened using quantum computing itself. And third point is that this new cryptanalysis will be necessary for standardization of the post-quantum cryptographic primitives. Maybe not all, but at least some of them. So I think with this, I would like to close.
All right. Yeah. Well, thank you, Professor Sule. Mr. Mika, Susi, can you please give your presentation?
Yes, thank you. Hopefully you all can hear me well.
Yes, we can.
Excellent. So good afternoon and greetings from here, golden, snowy Finland. So I'm Mika Susi and I'm Executive Director of Finnish Information Security Cluster, which is a cybersecurity business organization or association and consists of major cybersecurity businesses operating here in Finland, but also globally. But we also do have as members research institutions and educational institutions and lots of startups and SMEs from cybersecurity area. So I'm very happy and very honored to participate this webinar and panel today, since it's great always to bring the industry point of view to the discussion. And it's, of course, very fruitful to have good conversations with international colleagues and great experts, as we have heard here. First of all, thank you for these two presentations earlier. They were very interesting, and both topics are very important and very topical also here in Finland. They actually fit very well to our current focuses in cybersecurity area. We just introduced our new national cybersecurity strategy last year, and the implementation plan, which concentrates very much on developing cybersecurity skills and competencies through fostering R&D and collaboration between academia, private sector, and public state institutions. So basically, our goal is to create a cybersecurity ecosystem. So it's quite heavily discussed here in Finland nowadays. So according to different studies, we here in Finland, we are global leaders and pioneers in security, safety, resilience, stability, and even happiness. But we are also a Nordic digital country with many innovative companies. And this also applies to cybersecurity industry here in Finland. So we have great business world, but we also have great research institutions. And according to many studies, we are actually global #1 in availability of latest technology. So I think Finland is a very good place for cybersecurity business, but also as an R&D focused country, we can offer great possibilities for academia and research. So about the ecosystem model that we would like to create here. We have top skills, we have top quality, and what we need to build is the base ground in digital world nowadays. Since creating trust to the base ground of the digital society is the main question nowadays. As mentioned, when implementing the national cybersecurity strategy and creating the mentioned ecosystem, we identified three important main lines: collaboration, both in national level and in international level, flourishing industry, and strong national competencies and skills. And it's great to hear about the quantum computing, which is one of our main priorities. And also cryptanalysis is very important for our industry and for our nation as a whole. So if we think the cybersecurity as an ecosystem of different players, interests, and areas of technology, firstly, we need to think about how the secure society, critical assets, and the whole critical infrastructure is protected in fast evolving environment. This means how to lay a secure base ground for more efficient and resilient digital society when the technology, as we heard, goes forward in very fast pace. This, of course, should be emphasized right now. I think we have this awful COVID-19 pandemic, but what if we see a cyber pandemic with similar global scale? How we are prepared, or are we actually prepared? And we have been given some thoughts about that. How Finland, for example, is prepared. And we need the academia, we need public sector, we need private sector in order to get a good answer and right ways of collaborating. And I think the answer consists of course, the technical side, the technical components, the national architecture, strong and reliable encryption, as mentioned. I think that strong encryption is one of the key areas that we need to focus on. But it's also a matter of knowledge, education, and awareness. We need to include cybersecurity in all levels of education. As everyone knows nowadays how to read and write, I think in future or even right now, everyone should understand the basics of digital security. And this is very important for generations to come. And we are just seeing the beginning of the big process. So when cybersecurity base ground is in good level, we can build many new opportunities on top of that. We need to see cybersecurity as an enabler, not only defending us from threats or risks, but also creating new possibilities and making it possible to do things better, more efficiently, maybe also more, nature-friendly ways. So, in order to tackle the threats, but also create opportunities, you need an ecosystem which can generate resilience, prosperity, new competencies for the society. Cybersecurity, I think it's a horizontal issue. It involves everyone and every sector of industry nowadays. So we should find the crossroads where the most important verticals and the cybersecurity can produce the most efficient outcomes. So when we are talking about horizontal, it's a matter of horizontal collaboration too. And I think two important crossroads that I mentioned would be, as here earlier heard, the quantum computing and cryptanalysis. They are very important points where you can really have the effect on. So we need R&D, we need academia, we need authorities and industry to succeed in this, in tackling down the complexity of threats around us. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Susi. Okay, so let me make some remarks on what I see. So, well, thank you. People address lots of different kinds of issues. And in fact, Mr. Susi, your comments about how cybersecurity is going to become even more important, I will kind of pick up from there and hopefully give some examples. So let me even take a slightly more societal perspective, which is that people are changing. And a lot of it starts from there, that our behaviors are changing. So for example, in what way, which is relevant here? So one of the things is that we are becoming more digital. We have become much more digital, and we are going to become more digital. And it has some fundamental impacts. For example, one of the things is that because there are many different impacts of this, but I'm going to pick two. One is that more and more data about us is being collected. There's a plus to that now we get free information of all kinds, we get personalization of all kinds, and so on. But then that further creates both security and privacy threats. The more and more data about us is collected, the more and more security of that data. We hear about credit card hacks, this, that, everything, as well as there's privacy threats. And those threats actually come sort of bundled in benefits. And those threats are coming from two kinds of organizations, if you will. Well, I should say three. One is, of course, bad actors. Then there is private corporations, as well as governments. All of them are threats. And each of them, well, I guess not the bad actors, but even though they themselves, and each of them causes a threat to you in the guise of a benefit. Okay. And we humans are, and that is, so one is, as I said, more data collection. The second is that we are doing more and more, as part of being digital, we are doing more and more interaction at a distance. And so think of it this way, we used to walk into a store and at one point just give cash. And that is the only thing we trusted. Then we moved to checks. Then we moved to credit cards. And then all of a sudden to credit cards over the internet. So, and in each of these transactions, there is some risk involved, right? And that risk increases the more the distance is there. If you cannot really interact very closely with the other party, then the risk keeps increasing. So why do we agree to that? Because it's convenient. It is far more convenient for me to sit at home and order things from Amazon. Of course, these days, that's the thing to do because you don't want, it's medically dangerous to go to a store. But so it's a convenience, but that further increases the threat. So essentially, and what all of this has done is that it is also changing us as people from a psychological perspective. We go with all the benefits. We love those benefits. But the hidden security threats in that, we don't even see. And why do we not see it? Because I'm going to claim we are inherently schizophrenic. That is, each of us actually have two different personalities. You ask someone, do you care about security? And everyone will say yes. Then you tell them, okay, why do you behave in all these ways that inherently violate your security and privacy, like having your GPS of your cell phone on? Oh, well, I mean, I do it because it's convenient. So the point is that in the abstract level, in a panel like this, we can all sit and talk about security. It's so important. And then as soon as we turn off from this panel, we'll go and live our lives in the most insecure of ways. So that's why I call this schizophrenia of people with respect to security. So given the convenience of digital interaction in this world, and given that we are inherently schizophrenic about security, in a sense, we are doomed. Because the the problem is going to become more and more important and is going to become even more and more aggressive. Okay, so that's sort of the overall picture. That means in a sense we are doomed. And if you think about the concept of privacy, as I said, right, I mean, our teenager sense of privacy is the whole world can know as long as parents don't. So teenagers will go ahead and share information about them on Facebook and Instagram, this, that, whatever, the latest social media, but they won't friend their parents. And as long as parents don't know everything, the world can know it. That's privacy to them. They don't really care. Okay, so attitudes are changing. And as I said, there are a whole bunch of actors, from governments to private organizations to bad actors, who are out there, each of them offering a cookie to be able to get something, or something that you will enjoy for a while, some benefit, to be able to take information and act on it for their profit, for your harm, or whatever it is. Okay, so let's take some concrete examples. Social engineering attacks we have known for a long time, right? I mean, if you look at, people talked about cryptography. Cryptography has become pretty good, but there are so many other ways to break and get information that you don't even have to break a crypto system. Social engineering attacks are common ones, okay? And with things like AI, machine learning, and so on, smart chatbots, you don't even know who you're talking to. And you can, so social engineering attacks have become very, very common and are going to become even more powerful. Phishing attacks and all these things we see anyways, right? In fact, nowadays, at the other end of a phishing attack, with a multi-interaction attack, there might actually just be a smart AI bot. It doesn't even have to be a human being spending that effort. Another big one, of course, is fake information, right? From fake news to fake information on social networks to deep fake nowadays, anyone can be made to say anything. And in fact, even completely synthetic. So for instance, if I take a picture of some real person and make them say fake things, I could be sued. But if I create a deep fake, there is no real person, they just appear to be real, then I can't even be sued. Because whose rights am I violating? Okay. So these are some of the examples. And so, and of course, we already talked about sort of faster technology, faster and faster conventional supercomputers to going to quantum supercomputers. All of these are going to make these problems. They're also giving power in the hand of the bad actors to launch many of these kind of attacks. Okay. So what is so in general, I've painted a lot of picture of doom and gloom. What is the other side? The other side, I don't know how hopeful to be, but I guess we have to use the same power and technologies that are coming, that are available, to be able to fight it. Okay. However, how do we fight people, or how do we protect people who themselves are totally enamored with going digital for all the little benefits, and at the same time are schizophrenic about caring about privacy? They don't really care about privacy. So what we are seeing is as if we have a larger and larger size kindergarten of children, all of them having weak immune system, and you have to protect them from falling sick. So overall, I think we have an increasing problem. So maybe at some point, what may happen is literally what was his name? Scott McNealy, the first CEO of Sun Microsystems in mid 90s or early 90s, he made a statement. Someone said, Sun Microsystems is going after networking all these workstations and so on. Aren't you worried about privacy? And his aggressive off the cuff remark was, this is the world of networks. What privacy are you talking about? And it seems that at that point, maybe it came true or maybe it didn't come true. But as people have gone on and are using, are going digital more and more, and at the same time are not very careful at all, and even socio-psychologically, the newer and newer generation doesn't seem to care. So maybe we are headed for a new normal where people's notions of security is even different. So I will stop at that. Okay, great. So I think there are some questions.
So
Okay,
we can take one or two of these questions and try and end in the next couple of minutes.
sure. So there is a question that last 2 days we have seen the power of nation-affiliated threat actors lead to sophisticated breaches. How will research priorities in cybersecurity emerge? Okay, who would like to answer that? Maybe Mika, do you want to take that question since you have a very broad perspective from the industry?
Sorry, could you please repeat the question?
Yes. In the last few days, we have seen the power of nation-affiliated threat actors leading to sophisticated breaches. So the idea is, that let us say, one country attacking another country in the cyber world. So how will that impact research priorities in cybersecurity?
Yes, I think that is a very good question, and also a hard one, since of course cybersecurity is becoming more and more strategic security policy level question nowadays. Also, different states use their skills in order to gain access to intellectual property of different institutions. And of course, when there is such, let's say, technical battle between some areas or nations, there might be quite big risks also for research institutions to be subject to a cyber attacks. But this is the way the world seems to be nowadays. We have seen that, for example, the industrial espionage has pretty much went to networks, and we have actually done some also some research on the level of this phenomenon for Finnish and European economy, and it has a major effect on economies. So I think it's a very harmful thing, but we just need to find ways to protect the IP as well as possible. I think the mentioned strong encryption and all the different kind of defense methods that can be used should be used more widely than nowadays are done. I think the quite many of the institutions and quite many businesses also in different areas of industry, they lack some awareness of these risks, and we need to raise the awareness of these risks in order to give them more perspective on how they can defend and how they can secure their data, how they can secure their the people's data that they hold, for example. So I think raising awareness is very important thing in this, since if they knew the risks, they would also find the ways to counter them.
Yeah. So well, thank you, Mika. Let me add a little bit of my thoughts to this. So external threat actors, especially state-led threat actors, are essentially causing two kinds of threats. One is to the government sector, and the purpose is usually political, and the other is to private actors, whether purpose is largely industrial espionage. And both are obviously threats. One is a threat to the political system, one is a threat to the economy. So the question is, what is the research priority? So one of the examples, for instance, in the US, during Obama administration's second term, they created a separate command called the Cyber Defense Command. So that is actually a command now, full, that is at the top level under the military. And they are doing, of course, lots of efforts in that area. My sense is, and of course, when in the US model, for example, there's the operational component of these commands, and there's a research that involves the universities, various cybersecurity companies, and so on, right? So that is all going on. My sense is that kind of, and of course, the primary goal of that is to protect the government assets and, of course, the political system. Now, my sense is that eventually that research and that technology that comes out of that, as well as the operational practices, are going to be made available to the companies as well, to be able to protect their assets. And now, I'm suspecting that most countries will have to start, many of them already have done it, and others will have to start essentially some efforts like that. And potentially, just like in areas like CERT, there is usually worldwide collaboration between CERTs, maybe there will be collaboration between such agencies. So that is my sense of how some of this area might be addressed, because you need efforts like that. Because in this case, if it is state-oriented bad actors, then they have a lot of resources. So for response to that, you need appropriately resourced agencies. Other thoughts, Professor Veni Madhavan, Professor Sule?
Yeah.
Nothing much to add that just as you mentioned, the cyber defense, there's a new effort to build something called a National Critical Infrastructure Protection Coordination, a large NCPC. As you said, state level protection and commerce level protection is a big game, fraught with many things. But one of the things I think technological solutions is to have this redundancy, and every one of these things, there is thing which naturally builds some redundant systems, not only from state, but even from what we call the act of God, a tsunami or something, even the virus kind of thing, disabling all kinds of people power. So, yeah, it's a different set of measures which are adapted.
Yeah, I would like to point out here something which Harari has recently said in his books. And Harari has painted a scenario of this modern world of data, as Professor Srivastava was saying, that as more and more data is getting shared with these corporates and governments, and then there are these large systems, say like for example social networks. The corporates which are running these social networks, they of course are showing it as some kind of service. Or suppose if there is a medical company which is for which you sign up for sharing your data, then that company may offer some products to you, and that may be their mode of doing business. But as more and more data is being shared with government, with social networks, and with private corporates, there is going to be what is called as a digital dictatorship. And Harari mentions this digital dictatorship as one of the big threats, which is not going to be very easy for people to take as it becomes more and more powerful. Of course, these state actors may also have interests in the corporations which are actually controlling the data. So as more and more of personal data is being controlled by government or by private or by social networks or corporates, then we are more and more prone as individuals to this digital dictatorship. But at the same time, Harari also says that one should not underestimate human stupidity. It's a very big force. And so, well, I think there is not going to be any easy solution, because once people's attention is captured by certain stories which some government tells, that now, for example, political just for political purposes, some government, some politician may tell you stories about why some political party is doing this, or what is this propaganda and this that, and then large number of people may believe in it, and so therefore it also depends on what people believe, and especially as Harari says, religions as well as the evolution of cognition has come about in order for the Homo sapiens to collaborate or cooperate more with each other, but at the same time, it has had these other aspects by which the Homo sapien has become slave to his own societal culture. And I suppose Harari's books are really very thought-provoking, and he even paints a picture of the future of the man in this book called Homo Deus, as a new evolution from Homo sapiens, and how it will take the society ahead. All right.
Professors, we really need to wrap up now and
All right.
give some time to the next panel as well.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you, everyone. And I'm sure, these discussions always enlightening. Okay, well, thank you all of you. And thank you, Vikas, for organizing this panel. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor, and
All
thank
right.
you all the
Okay.
esteemed
All right.
panelists. And
Bye-bye.
thank you, audience, for being here with us today.